State calls Dr. Varsha Podduturi.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Please raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this cause will be the truth.
Yes.
Thank you.
Morning, Doctor.
Hi, good morning.
Would you introduce yourself to the jury, please?
Sure, my name is Dr. Varsha Podduturi. It's spelled V as in Victor, A-R-S-H-A, and the last name is P-O-D-D-U-T-U-R-I.
And Dr. Podduturi, how were you employed?
I'm currently an assistant medical examiner at the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences in Houston, Texas.
And how long have you been with the Harris County Department?
2 years and 3 months now.
Prior to going to Harris County, where were you employed?
I did my forensic pathology fellowship at the Southwestern Institute of Forensic Sciences here in Dallas, Texas.
Can you give this jury a rundown of your educational background?
Sure. So I went to medical school at the Texas Tech University School of Medicine in Lubbock, Texas, where I obtained my Doctor of Medicine degree. And then I did a 4-year anatomic and clinical pathology residency here in Dallas at the Baylor University Medical Center. And then I did a 1-year forensic pathology fellowship as with.
But you are a doctor of medicine.
Correct.
Can you tell the jury what is the difference between a medical examiner, what you do on a day-to-day basis, versus a ear, nose, and throat doctor?
So a medical examiner is one that performs autopsies, and an autopsy is an examination of a deceased body externally and internally to determine the cause and manner of death.
And whenever someone passes, is there always an autopsy done?
No, not on all cases. Not all cases are reportable to medical examiner offices.
What are the circumstances that call for an autopsy?
Cases, non-natural deaths, for example, or cases where the person doesn't have a doctor to sign off on their death certificate are examples of those.
Just in general, can you describe to the jury the process of an autopsy?
Sure. So once the body is received at the medical examiner's office, it's given a unique case number as it comes in. And after that, the body is assigned to a doctor that day. And then they, once they get into the autopsy suite or the morgue, they make sure that the body matches the identification number that was initially received, and then they start taking pictures and performing an external examination. So in the external examination, things such as height, weight, hair color, eye color, any evidence of injury, the clothing the person was wearing are all documented. And then the body is subsequently, clothes are removed if they have clothes on, and it's cleaned, and then another round of external examination is examined, and then once that's finished, they examine all the organs internally, and they find any natural disease or document any injuries that are present.
And all of that is documented?
Yes.
Is it also photographed?
Yes.
When you conduct an autopsy, is there a unique number assigned to each autopsy?
Yes.
And is that purpose so that you can always document what was done during the course of the autopsy?
Yes.
We're approaching witness, Sean. Doctor, I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 232 and ask you if you recognize that document.
Yes.
And is this actually an autopsy that you did back in 2015 on Kendra Hatcher?
Yes.
And is there a unique number assigned to this autopsy?
Yes.
Could you read that out for the jury?
Sure. It's IFS-15-14219.
And I also want to show you State's Exhibit 233. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And does this contain the unique number that's noted on your autopsy?
Yes.
Documented autopsy?
Yes, same number.
And then looking at State's Exhibits 234, 235, 236, 237, 238, 239, 240, 241, 242, 243, 244, and 245. These photographs from the autopsy that you performed on Dr. Kendra Hatcher.
Yes.
We would offer States 233 for record purposes and 234 through 245 for all purposes.
Your Honor, we have no objection, and the defense will enter into a stipulation with the state that the person depicted in State's Exhibit 233 for record purposes is one and the same individual depicted in State's Exhibits 1 and 2 admitted for all purposes.
Thank you. Admitted.
And you brought a copy of the autopsy with you.
I did.
So Doctor, if you could start off by letting us know what is the first thing you did upon receiving Dr. Hatcher's body?
So the first thing I did is I documented the clothing that she had on and what she was received with.
And what would be the next step after that?
I took a round of photos as well and documented the hair color, the eye color, etc.
Were you able to notice any visible injuries on Dr. Hatcher?
Yes.
And can you describe to the jury the injuries that you noticed upon seeing the body?
Yeah, so there was a gunshot wound on the occipital scalp, which is the back of the head, and then an exit wound on the bottom of the chin, the submental region of the head, as well as some scattered abrasions and contusions or bruises.
Okay. When you say scattered abrasions and contusions, are you talking about on various parts of her body?
Correct.
And the wound to her head, it was obvious to you that it was a gunshot wound?
Yes.
Would you look to see if you found any soot or stippling at that wound?
Yes.
And did you find any soot or stippling on that wound?
I did not.
Are there various reasons that you might not find soot or stippling on that wound?
Yes, there are, and those would be if the muzzle of the gun was a certain distance away from the decedent, or possibly the hair could have precluded some of the gunpowder particles from landing on the skin.
Okay. Now, you and I know what soot and stippling is. Can you tell the jury what soot and stippling is?
Sure. So when a gun is fired, it's not only the bullet that it exits the gun. There's soot as well as gunpowder particles that also exit as well. And depending on how close the muzzle is to the person that's being shot, some of those particles may end up on the decedent, giving you a better idea or giving a range of how close the muzzle of the gun was to the person that was being shot.
Is it also possible that if there is a heavy flow of blood from that wound, soot or stippling could be washed away with that?
No. No, typically those are things that would stay on the skin.
Okay. What about if there is a large amount of hair around the wound?
So that may preclude some of the gunpowder particles from striking the skin. That's a possibility.
If there's evidence that the body had to be dragged distance in terms of for treatment, could that have an impact on the presence of soot or stippling on the wound?
No.
Or Coach Witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Taking a look at State's Exhibits 234, what are we looking at here?
So this is a picture or a photograph of the back of the head of the gunshot wound before it's been cleaned off.
And State's Exhibits 235, what are we seeing here?
So this is a photograph of the entrance gunshot wound to the back of the head once the hair is removed and the body is cleaned off.
And what are we looking at States Exhibits 233?
So that's the exit gunshot wound. That's on the bottom of the chin.
And where was that exit wound?
On the submental region of the head, beneath the chin. So right
here?
Yeah.
So if the entrance wound is to the back of the head and the exit wound is basically under the chin, what would be the pathway for that bullet?
So the pathway of that bullet would be back to front and downward.
Now, looking at States Exhibits 238, does that appear to be another injury to the body?
Yes, that seems to be a 2-inch dried red abrasion, X-shaped, that's on her chest.
And if we look at States Exhibit 239, does it show the exit wound entry as well as the injury that's on the chest?
Yes,
And do those appear to be lined up in a straight line as if the chin was resting on her chest?
yes.
Now, the gunshot injury that Dr. Hatcher suffered, what parts of her body would that have affected?
So the path of the bullet injured the subscapular tissue on the back of the head, as well as the occipital skull, which is one of the bones, as well as the first cervical vertebra, which is attached to the head, or the skull rather, the spinal cord, the posterior pharynx, which is the neck structures, the tongue, and then exits out the bottom of the chin.
What effect on her body would that injury have had?
So that the injury to the spinal cord that was transected would have caused respiratory depression or her being not able to breathe.
And that type of injury, how long would her life expectancy have been after suffering that type of injury?
So that's a pretty significant injury, so she probably would not have been able to survive very long after that.
Is it the type of injury that if she had received medical treatment, she might have survived?
Maybe if it was, immediately after she was shot, but most
If
likely not.
someone suffers this type of injury, shot in the back of the head, can you give roughly some idea of how long that person might live?
Probably within a few minutes they would have been deceased.
May I approach you in here?
You may.
Doctor, I'm going to show you States Exhibits 246 through 263. You've taken a look at those this morning,
Yes,
and these are photographs that you took during the course of the autopsy.
yes.
Your Honor, we'd offer States 246 through 263 for record purposes.
No objection.
You made it?
And the autopsy that you performed, you documented that autopsy
Yes,
in a written report,
yes,
and you signed it,
yes.
and did your peers at SWIFT, did they also sign off on that autopsy?
Yes.
We would offer States Exhibits 232.
No objection.
You made it.
As part of the autopsy, do you also do what is called a toxicology?
Yes,
What is the purpose of doing a toxicology?
to identify any substances that are within the system of the decedent.
Okay, when we say substances, are we talking about whether or not there's any alcohol,
Correct, or any drugs.
any drug usage? Looking at States 232, what is the toxicology report for Dr. Kendra Hatcher?
But the toxicology report is negative.
So no alcohol,
Correct,
no drugs.
correct.
And then the manner and means of her death. Are there several manners and means of death that are documented on an autopsy?
Yes.
And what would those be?
So there are several manners of death, including undetermined, natural, accident, suicide, or homicide.
And what was the manner and mean of Dr. Kendra Hatcher's death?
The manner of death is homicide, and the cause of death is gunshot wound of the head into the neck.
Pass the witness.
I have no question, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You may stand down. You're free to
There we go.
Please, the court, members of the jury, stay rest.
Members of the jury, we're going to take a brief recess. It's 10 o'clock right now, so we've got the jury room at 10:10.
All rise.
Just want to go ahead and make a motion, or let me do it all at one time if I could. We go ahead and take a break.
Okay. So, sorry?
I didn't. And I can stand up. It's just this guy on this end. Big guy on the other. So there's no, there are,
Are you ready? 46 versus 63.
yes.
246
We're 263, I need over here. We're for record.